The road home should have been ordinary. In 1991, Glenn was just a tired university student, riding the back of a school bus through Nova Scotia, heading to his parents' hometown for the weekend. He turned in the final paper that morning, hadn't slept more than 3 hours, and the rumble of the engine felt like it could lull him to sleep any minute. The bus was nearly empty after the main drop-off at the town line. Only a quiet family with 2 small kids sat up front near the driver. The children had stopped chasing each other up the aisle 10 minutes back, now just murmured to each other over a crumpled coloring book. Everything felt normal. Just the low thrum of the engine whined hissing through the cracked window next to Glenn's seat. The faint smell of diesel and old vinyl upholstery. The bus climbed a long, slow hill past the old Michelin tire factory. Glenn shifted in his seat, lifted his head to stare out the window. Rust-streaked, chain-link fence slid past, crumbling brick facade, windows gaping empty like broken teeth. The factory had been abandoned for years, gutted by a fire no one had bothered to put out completely. Glenn had passed it a dozen times before, never thought twice. Then, a strange pressure filled his skull. It started as a dull throb behind his eyes, quickly bloated into a full ache that made him grip the plastic bus seat hard until his knuckles turned white. His vision blurred at the edges, the empty brick facade stretching and warping like melted wax. For no reason at all, he suddenly imagined dozens of invisible passengers crammed into the empty seats around him, all of them laughing at him, mocking, cruel laughter that echoed loud inside his mind, loud enough to drown out the engine's rumble. He squeezed his eyes shut, pressed the heels of his palms into his temples, tried to grind the sound out of his skull. The world blinked. In that single, impossible instant, everything shifted. The ache vanished. The laughter cut off mid-cackle. Glenn wrenched his eyes open. The bus was no longer at the top of the hill. It was a full mile back down the highway. White paint lines on the asphalt rolled by the window at the same exact speed, as if the last several minutes had been violently ripped away and rewound. Glenn's stomach lurched hard. He swallowed down a rush of sour bile that burned the back of his throat. He sat frozen, heart hammering against his ribs, and watched in horror as the bus climbed the hill again. It passed the tire factory a second time. Every cracked window, every broken sign was exactly as before. The family that had been chatting quietly about their weekend trip moments earlier now sat deathly silent. Their faces were pale and rigid, their eyes wide with the same cold terror. Glenn felt coiled tight in his own chest. No one moved, no one spoke. The only sound was the low, steady rumble of the engine, unchanged. Sue and her boyfriend Jim never expected the night to swallow them whole that night. It was autumn 1994, and they were driving home to Fallbrook, California, along the winding 4-mile stretch of Mission Road. The road was usually busy, even on a Friday evening. People drove up to the mountains for camping, headed out to dinner in the next town. Headlights swept past every 30 seconds at least, cutting streaks through the dark. The radio hummed static between stations. The heater blew warm air against Sue's ankles. Everything felt like a normal end to a normal weekend. After they turned onto Mission Road, that changed. A minute passed. No car passed in the opposite direction. 2 minutes. Still nothing. Not one set of headlights cut through the dark. Not one pair of taillights glowed ahead of them. The radio went first. The static faded to nothing. Then, the silence closed in. It was not the soft silence of an empty car. It was thick. It pressed against Sue's eardrums, like holding her head underwater. It felt wrong, suffocating. like the air had thickened into something you couldn't draw into your lungs. Sue shifted in her seat, leaned forward to glance at the glowing amber clock on the stereo. Numb, 24 p.m. She opened her mouth to mention the silence to Jim. Before she could speak, everything died. The engine cut out without a sputter. No final cough, no warning rattle, just cut. The headlights vanished instantly, swallowing the road in front of them. The power steering went stiff as a board under Jim's hands. He braced both arms against the wheel, fought to keep the car from veering off the shoulder as it rolled. It rolled silently for another 20 seconds, then stopped. It came to rest on an overgrown dirt turnout off the side of the road. The dark outside was total. No moon, no starlight, no distant glow from a house on the horizon. Sue felt as if she had been yanked through something thick and cold, like being pulled through gelatinous darkness. Her mind reeled. Jim sat frozen for 3 heartbeats, his hands still clamped to the stiff steering wheel. He cursed under his breath, fumbled for the door handle, and shoved it open. The night air hit him, cold and still, no wind moving through the trees along the roadside. He slammed the door shut behind him, boots crunching on loose gravel and dead grass as he ran around the front of the car. His shadow stretched nothing, swallowed whole by the total dark. He wrenched open the driver's side door, reached across the seat, and pulled Sue out by her wrist. He guided her to the passenger side, got her seated, and slid behind the wheel himself. The entire exchange took less than a minute. Jim jammed the key into the ignition, held his breath, and turned it. The engine roared to life on the first turn. Headlights blazed back to life, cutting through the dark to illuminate the overgrown brush ahead. Both of them exhaled at the same time. The relief was sharp, hot, enough to almost wash away the cold dread that had clamped around their chests. Jim put the car in gear, pulled back onto the empty asphalt, and drove away. Neither spoke. Both stared straight ahead at the dark road unwinding under the headlights. Sue's pulse finally slowed. She turned her head to glance at the amber clock on the stereo, just to check how long they'd been stopped. The numbers glowed back at her. 6:36 p.m. 12 minutes had passed. She counted the steps again in her head. Getting out, switching seats, restarting. It couldn't have taken more than 90 seconds. Somewhere in that gap, something had reached out. Something had touched them. It had tasted their fear, and it had let them go. For now, the story jumps 3 decades back and 2,000 miles north to the dusty heat of rural Alabama in the 1920s. Time itself was about to fold in on itself on the Hawkins farm, and a dozen people would watch it happen. 7-year-old Ula White sat on the wooden porch with women from neighboring farms, shelling peas into chipped ceramic bowls under a bright, hazy summer sky. Crickets chirped steady in the fence line. Flies buzzed slow around the porch rail, droning in the still heat. A breeze carried the scent of cut hay from the fields behind the house. No one felt anything wrong. No one sensed the crack opening right in front of their eyes. They saw Mr. Hawkins riding up the dirt road on his bay horse, a heavy white sack of flour tied tight across the saddle, a crumpled brown bag of groceries cradled in his arm. One of the Hawkins boys jumped up from the steps, yelling for his pa, and ran down the packed dirt path to open the wooden gate for him. Mr. Hawkins nudged the horse into a walk, following the boy toward the gate. He was 10 paces out, reins loose in his hand, nodding at the women on the porch. The boy reached for the gate's wooden latch. 1 second Mr. Hawkins was there, the next he was gone. Horse, flour, sack, groceries, and all. No dust cloud left in his place, no sound of a fall, no hoofbeats fading into the trees. He simply ceased to exist. right in front of all of them. The boy froze, hands still stretched toward the latch. He blinked once, then turned back toward the porch, his face already draining of color. One of the older women leaned forward, squinting, as if she could squint Mr. Hawkins back into view. Then she screamed. The sound tore through the quiet summer air. The children scattered back against the porch wall. Terror clawed through them like icy fingers dragging down their spines. They pressed back against the porch siding, too shocked to move. No one dared walk down to the gate to check. Half an hour passed. The group still huddled on the porch, shaking too hard to move. Then Mr. Hawkins appeared again, right where he had vanished. He rode the same bay horse, carried the same flour sack and grocery bag, nodded the same quiet nod at the gate. No one dared move to open it. He tilted his head, called out, and that was that time had folded, and a man had gotten to his destination before he left. The world keeps these cracks hidden most of the time, but every so often, they open wide enough for ordinary people to fall in. 8-year-old Ryan Bratton learned this firsthand, playing catch with his friend Tommy in his parents' front yard. A dark blue sedan rolled slowly down the street, stopped at the white picket fence across the way. A boy their age jumped out, slammed the door, ran inside yelling and laughing just like any kid after school. A minute later, a 10-year-old girl rode her bike down the driveway after him, calling his name loud over the wind. 2 minutes later, the exact same dark blue sedan rolled down the street again. It pulled into the exact same spot. The exact same boy jumped out, slammed the exact same door, ran inside, making the exact same yell. The exact same girl rode down the driveway, laughing the exact same laugh, calling the exact same name. Ryan's heart hammered so hard it hurt his ribs. He turned to Tommy. Tommy's face was bone white. Neither spoke. They both knew what they'd seen. Time had stuttered right in front of them, and they'd caught it. The most terrifying crack of all was found by Daisy in September 2004, outside Des Moines, Iowa. She and her friend Rick were driving through the night in Rick's beat-up old pickup, heading to a campsite 3 hours outside town. The engine died suddenly on a deserted 2-lane highway, flanked on both sides by endless cornfields. No headlights from other cars, no cell phone signal, no distant house lights cutting through the dark. Just total blackness and the soft rustle of corn stalks whispering in the wind around them. They pulled the map out from the glove box, checked the landmarks again. The nearest town was 2 miles north, straight down the highway. They locked the truck and set out walking, hoping to flag down a passing car, find a payphone, get help. The gravel under their boots crunched loud in the silence. Dust tickled the back of their throats. The first mile passed slow, but they kept moving. Then the second mile ended, and the hill they'd been climbing still stretched ahead. No town lights glowed over the crest. No traffic sound carried on the wind. Daisy pulled out her wristwatch, squinted at the dial in the dark. They had been walking for 3 hours. 3 hours of steady walking would have covered 10 miles, minimum. The cornfields stretched on, unbroken, same as they had when they left the truck. Their feet ached so bad, every step sent a sharp jolt up their calves. Their throats were raw from dry dust. A cold prickle crawled up the back of Daisy's neck. Something had stretched the road. Something had stretched the time. Then she saw it. A blinding, unnatural glow crested the hill ahead of them. It was too bright, too white, nothing like the soft yellow glow of streetlights or porch lights. It seared the dark, turning the edges of the cornstalks silver. They ran toward it, lungs burning, desperate for any sign of other people, desperate to escape the silent, endless dark that had swallowed the road. They stumbled up the slope, boots slipping on loose gravel, and reached the crest. They stopped dead. What waited below was not a town. It was a city that had no right to exist. Massive metallic towers stabbed up into the black sky, every window blazing with cold, sterile, white light. In the center of the city stood a colossal silver dome that pulsed slow, steady, like a living heart beating under skin. Above the towers, hundreds of silent hovercraft drifted through the black air. They hung motionless, low over the rooftops, like predatory water bugs clinging to the still surface of a pond. No engine noise, no movement but the slow drift. Then one craft broke away from the pack. It streaked toward them at impossible speed. It moved faster than any jet plane, faster than any race car Daisy had ever seen on the highway. It cut through the dark without a sound. A silver bullet aimed straight for the crest of the hill where they stood. Daisy screamed. Rick grabbed her arm and spun her around. They ran. They didn't look back. They didn't dare, but they both felt it. Eyes. Cold, ancient, inhuman eyes locked on their backs, burning through their shirts, tracking every stumbling step they took. The gravel on the slope gave way under Daisy's boots. She went down hard, palms scraping raw on loose stone. Rick hauled her up by the elbow. Didn't stop running, didn't slow down. They cut through the edge of the cornfield to shorten the path, and the dry stalks lashed at their cheeks, left thin, stinging cuts across their skin. The corn stalks whispered around them, but over that whisper, they could hear it. A low, high-pitched hum, growing closer every second, breathing down their necks. They burst out onto the highway shoulder, and there was the truck, right where they left it, dark and silent against the black corn. Rick fumbled the keys out of his pocket, dropped them once, scrambled to grab them in the dark, jammed them into the ignition. He turned the key. The engine roared to life on the first try. No sputter, no hesitation, just the familiar rumble they thought they'd never hear again. Rick slammed the truck into gear, spun the steering wheel, and peeled out down the highway in the opposite direction of the city. They never slowed down. They never looked in the rearview mirror. They never spoke of that night to anyone else, not even to each other after they got off the highway. 17 years have passed since that night. Daisy has built a life. She has a job. She has a home. She pays her taxes. She goes for walks on weekends. She does everything any ordinary person does. But some things cannot be buried. Not completely. In the darkest hours before dawn, when the house is silent and the moon hangs low outside the window, Daisy still wakes up screaming. She jolts upright in bed, sheets twisted tight around her legs, her entire body slick with cold sweat. Her heart hammers against her ribs so hard it aches, like she's just finished that desperate sprint through the cornrows. She can still taste the dry dust in her throat. She can still feel the sting of the corn stalks on her cheeks. She can still see that silver dome, pulsing slow and steady, a living heart beating in the center of a city that does not belong in her time. She never drives that highway anymore. She takes the long way around, adds 40 minutes to every trip through that part of Iowa, rather than get within 10 miles of that stretch of road. Sometimes, when she's alone late at night, scrolling through her phone, she finds herself hovering over the search bar. Her finger hovers over the screen, ready to type in missing people, Des Moines, vanished highway, future city. She never hits search. She knows she won't find anything. Or worse, she will. She knows that whatever let them go that night did not forget them. It didn't just lose their scent. It's still waiting. It's still searching. It watches the cracks in the world, the places where time folds in on itself. where the past and future bleed through into the ordinary lives we think are safe. The world blinks. It always blinks. And the next time it blinks, it won't let go.